Hi, thank you all for coming. When I started at Epic Games in 1991, I had this sinking feeling that I was too late, that the leading developers and publishers had already been established and that I wouldn't really have a chance. And so it's been awesome to watch over the past 30 years this industry evolve from essentially a garage business into nearly $100 billion a year global industry that's a powerhouse. But throughout this time, we've seen a lot of precedents established in the game industry, a lot of them without much thought, and a lot of them just the result of random happenstance. They've become kind of established as the ground rules of the industry. I think we need to step back and take stock of them and recognize that some of the operating principles for the game business are wrong. And I'd like to go through it systematically and talk about what I see coming in the next decade of gaming and how I think we need to adjust our way of thinking about games and gaming ecosystems in order to achieve our maximum potential. So the next decade, I think we're going to see a continuing trend along the lines of gaming becoming a first-class social activity. Right? In the early days, gaming was solitary. You'd plug in a cartridge into your Atari, you'd play. It would be just you alone experiencing this thing. Now gaming is primarily a social experience. People more and more are deciding to get together with their friends, and then once they're together with their friends, they're deciding what to play. They're doing this in Discord or TikTok or other chat apps. In China, they're doing it on WeChat. In Korea, they're doing it on KakaoTalk. So we've seen kind of the Western world lagging in this regard. But I think more and more we're going to see people approach gaming as a social activity first and foremost, getting together with their friends and then deciding which games to play. And so this means that gaming is going to be as much a communication platform as an entertainment experience. We're also seeing gaming develop into an economy on its own. If you look at Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, you see games with really vibrant user-created content ecosystems. This began as modding in the early 1990s in the days of Quake and Wolfenstein and Unreal, but it's really evolving into something that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry in itself. And so we really need to start thinking about games not just as entertainment experiences, but as economies where other creators can participate and contribute and have their ideas heard. And finally, because gaming is such a social and mainstream phenomena, gaming is also becoming a platform for discourse. And when a streamer jumps in and shares a political message in the context of an e-sport, or just a streamer or commentator on Reddit expresses their opinion, we're seeing gaming become more like a social network, and whether we like it or not, we're going to have to accept that gaming is now a platform for world discourse. But most importantly, the whole game business is becoming the biggest creative and social marketplace in history. I think this means that as an industry, we're going to have special responsibilities that we need to consider really deeply. And so I've tried to come up with two sets of guiding principles. One is the guiding principles for consumers in the game business. I think the critical thing is that a gamer should be free to engage any game with all of their friends, wherever they want, without any unnecessary friction. And this is a big directional change compared to the kind of balkanized days when you had some games on mobile, some very different games on PC, some different games on console. But we're seeing like Fortnite and other games, more and more games are shipping everywhere and becoming pervasively available. And this will become even more so as we have streaming established as a platform where you can play a game on PC or console or mobile, or you can stream any game to any device from anywhere. Now, I'd also like to talk about a guiding principle for us, the suppliers in the game business. I think it's critically important to competition that we all be free to mix and match platforms and engines and online services however we want, free of lock-in and free of tying of different services to different platforms in a way which forces us to accept inefficient solutions. And the goal of all of this is to establish a level playing field where everybody can compete on equal terms and the best solutions can win. And the economic competition between us all keeps us honest and keeps the entire supply chain fair for everybody. Now, in this world, gamers and creatives are really at the core. I think we have to recognize that platforms and stores and engines and all of the services supporting them are secondary, right? We're participants in the supply chain of game development. I think it's we have to recognize that undue power has accrued to many of their participants who are not at the core of the industry, but are suppliers and have used their position in control of a platform or a social outlet or other things to gain an undue and unfair share of revenues. And so I'll dig into that over time. But I wanted to start out with really the good news over the past few years in the game industry. And the good news is that all of the platforms have opened up and become fully interoperable. And this is an awesome thing. We saw, at the beginning of the last decade, every platform had its own online service. You couldn't communicate across all platforms. And very slowly, different platforms opened up. But Fortnite had the honor of being kind of a forcing function. It was a game that had gained such wide adoption among so many players on so many different devices that it had become a real problem that you couldn't play on your iPhone and connect to somebody on Xbox or PlayStation. And this was actually dividing up social groups, and creating fissures through actual, gaming communities and real-world social associations of players. And so, after a lot of discussions and a lot of wrangling, Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo came on board, and everybody agreed to allow full interoperability. And so now we're in a world where you can play Fortnite or Call of Duty or any of those games on any platform, connect with your friends on all platforms, voice chat with friends on those platforms, and create friends, a social graph that transcends platform boundaries. And this has been a truly wonderful thing. And if you look at the Fortnite couch experience, where you might have two players on a PlayStation playing split screen, and somebody sitting on an iPhone next to them, and somebody on an old laptop PC, all in the same game session together, it's really quite miraculous. And the numbers prove that this is the future of gaming. Just in Fortnite and our more recent efforts with the Epic Games Store, we've accrued 300 million users across all 7 platforms, and they've built more than 1.6 billion social connections, social connections among friends as you have on a traditional social network. So that's a good first step. But I think the next step here is to start connecting all of the ecosystems, because we still have the problem that your Xbox Live friends are only Xbox players, your PlayStation Network friends are only PlayStation players, your Steam friends are only PC players and only on Steam, and this creates a huge chasm for interoperability. And so I think, as everybody right now is cobbling together solutions, Epic has a solution, Activision has a solution, different companies each have their own solution, each creating their own separate friend system and separate social systems. They're still unconnected. I think there's a real chasm that needs to be filled here. And Epic's taken some steps to open up the social systems that we built for Fortnite as Epic Online Services and start making them available to developers. And some games like Dauntless have shipped using that. But this is all just patchwork and stopgap measures in advance of what really needs to happen next, which is connecting and federating all of these different systems together. And something similar happened in the really old days of the internet, when every university and big company had an email system that was just proprietary to themselves. Somebody introduced the @ sign into email addresses. So now I could be Tim at Epic and talk to Tim at Microsoft or Tim at Sony, and we'd have an unambiguous way of referring to people across ecosystems. And that involved everybody with their own proprietary system agreeing to connect to everybody else's system. And they used different software frameworks, but they agreed on protocols and connected stuff up. And this critically needs to happen in gaming. You see with Microsoft, their efforts to open up Xbox Live to platforms outside of Xbox has achieved some traction. Epic's efforts have achieved some traction, but ultimately we all need to get together and agree to connect up. And one of the biggest obstacles to doing this in the past has been this. Sorry, it's a mind virus. This idea that publishers should own the customer or have a monopoly on the customer relationship, through some form of login and e-commerce. And that's just a bad idea. It's the opposite of the principles that Epic has built Fortnite on. The funny thing about Epic's ecosystem is you can log into the Epic Games Store or into Fortnite with a Sony account, a Microsoft account, a Nintendo account, an Epic account, a Google account, a Facebook account, a VX account from the Russian social network, and we're opening it up to more and more. And I think what we all really want and should agree that we should accept is equal access to all customers in a world with billions of users participating. And we need to give up our attempts to each create our own private walled garden and private monopoly and agree to work together and recognize that we are all far better off if we connect our systems and grow our social graphs together than if we each try to do it on our own. And the numbers bear this out too. In Fortnite, a player who plays with friends at all spends twice as much time in the game and spends more money than a player who plays alone. And a player who plays on multiple devices or plays with friends across multiple devices is plays for twice as long as just the normally socially connected people. So cross-platform, cross-ecosystem is the future, and we need to do it all for our own good. And so that concludes my talk about the good news in the industry, and now I'd like to talk about the bad and the ugly. Right, when they invited me up here to give a talk at DICE and have the freedom to say whatever I wanted, I was like, oh, like Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes? And that panicked them. So I was like, oh, don't worry, there's nothing to worry about. My talk won't be at all funny. But I think if we try to identify the bad trend that's hurt the entire tech industry over the past decade, it's the advent of the customer adversarial business model. Right? Traditional businesses made a product, they set a price, they sold it to customers, and there was a lot of competition, and so the relationship between customers and businesses was largely a positive and collaborative one. The customer had every desire to buy the best product they could find, and every supplier had the strong incentive to provide the best product, and so the negotiation was just about price and terms. But otherwise, when they reached agreement on price, the customers and the suppliers always were working together for their mutual good. But what we've had now is a massive scale development of industries that are based on adversarial business models, businesses that profit from doing customers harm. And doing their supporting ecosystem harm, including companies like us. And Facebook and Google have been one of the leaders in this trend. They give you a service for free and then make you pay for it in a form of currency that's dearer than money. They make you pay for their service in loss of privacy and loss of freedom. And that model has really pervaded the industry to the point where it gives everybody, not only the user climate, but also the political climate, an incredibly negative view of the entire tech industry. And it does a lot of collateral damage to good companies like us. I think it's really critical that we all help the tech industry transition away from these customer adversarial business models to positive ones. And just the extent to which this pervades the industry has been really scary. The other one is the establishment of these platforms, and these closed platforms in particularly, as a means of extracting unfair monopoly profits. Let's compare two payments industries. Number one is the traditional payments industry, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, all of these systems, and the other is the Apple, Google payment systems that are forced on us in mobile games. The payment industry has undergone enormous competition and efficiency improvement over time. You can process a Visa card transaction for 2.5% to 3.5%, depending on territory. And if you break it down into where that 2.5% goes, it's generally distributed among a dozen different suppliers who each provide some slice of the service of processing transactions, whether it's the bank that's doing the clearing, or the company that's billing the customer, or the company that's providing anti-fraud services. Generally, as a merchant, you can choose and mix and match companies and suppliers from each of these different segments, and each of them competes on very vigorously to ensure you have the best rates. And despite all of that, the payment industry is very profitable. If you just look at their revenue, disregard the total amount that's paid for a transaction, and just look at their slice of the fee that they get. Many of these payment processing companies have 50% profit margins on their fee, and their fees are often 0.2% or something of the like, and so they make a 0.1% profit on processing massive volumes of transactions. And over the past 50 years of evolution of this industry, it's become incredibly efficient. Whereas the payment fees on iOS and Android are completely decoupled from any economic cost equation whatsoever. And everybody who operates a digital commerce ecosystem has a pretty good understanding of the costs There's payment processing. The fees range from 2.5% to 6%, depending on territory and payment method. There's bandwidth involved, and CDNs, which charge 1% to 1.5%. There's anti-fraud. There's customer support. But in general, in Epic's efforts to operate the Epic Games Store at a 12% store fee, we can build a very profitable business around this, and generally the 30% business model is a result of Apple and Google marking up their actual payment processing operating costs by a factor of 5 or 6, and just pocketing that on their own. And this would not be a problem if every company had an equal opportunity to compete. What we really need in the entire gaming industry is payment processing freedom, the ability for publishers to process payments on any platform however they want, in order to choose the best solutions and let the best solutions win on a level playing field. And if we had that, then suddenly you'd see a migration of publishers away from these 30% fee payment processing methods to the 2.5% fee methods, and over time, competition would lead all of the platforms to improve. But the problem is they ban competition. Epic submitted Fortnite to Google Play. First of all, Epic released Fortnite on Google Play, outside of Google Play, targeting Android through a web release. And we've had millions, tens of millions of users come in that way, and it's been a successful launch. But we couldn't help but notice that software distributed outside of Google Play operates at an immense disadvantage to software distributed within Google Play. To get the application installed from a web page, instead of clicking an install button once, as on Google Play, you have to go through a really scary series of security dialogues and often rummage around in your phone and change settings just to get the application installed. And then every time an update needs to be installed, you have to go through another scary set of permission dialogues that seem almost written to scare people away from that. And so what we have in the case of Android is a fake open platform. A platform that's open in name, but it obstructs users from installing applications in such a devious way that it puts every other store at a tremendous disadvantage. And Apple's approach is different. Apple is honest about it. They say this is a closed platform. You can only distribute apps through us, and all transactions have to go through a 30% payment processing fee. And they justify that based on security reasons, but it's not really honest. The core of security on an operating system is two things. It's number one, the ability for the operating system kernel to implement permissions-based security, ensure that apps cannot do anything that users don't authorize them to do. Apple is the best in the world. They could open up their platform tomorrow and it would still remain perfectly secure. In fact, Apple does operate an open platform around iOS. They have this enterprise program in which any enterprise customer can install any app from their enterprise just by whitelisting their enterprise signing certificate. But the sole thing preventing that from being used for consumer apps is just a contract term that says you're not allowed to do that. I think the next step that has to happen with mobile platforms is, first of all, fully opening up so that every publisher who wants can launch their own store on the platform, and it operates technically within the operating system on equal terms to the platform's own store. And number two, even these stores, which have massive market share, the iOS App Store and Google Play, need to open up to support publisher-controlled payment services so that every payment processor, from Xsolla to MasterCard and Visa to PayPal, can each compete on an open playing field for payments. And just to see if that was possible, Epic submitted Fortnite to Google Play, went through a few revisions, and ultimately it was rejected solely on the basis that we supported payment outside of Google's payment ecosystem. And that's unfair, and that needs to change, and it will change. And I think we as an industry need to use all of our resources to ensure that all of these platforms are opened up to us as speedily as possible. So untying all of these services is really important. But another thing that really needs to happen over time is purchase portability. The huge amount of this unfair platform lock-in comes from the fact that you buy a game on one platform, and if you move to another platform from a different vendor, you no longer own the game. That digital purchase, which you thought you owned, is no longer yours because of the device you chose to buy it on. And we've already, thanks to really generous and successful efforts by Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, free-to-play games like Fortnite now have purchase freedom across all platforms. You can buy a Fortnite item on iOS and use it on your PlayStation or Xbox, or you can buy it on your Nintendo Switch and use it on PlayStation, and that's really wonderful. But that needs to be elevated to the higher level of supporting purchases across stores. You know, if Activision would like Call of Duty purchases to be portable between platforms, then you should be able to buy the game on Xbox and play it on PlayStation, and play it on iOS, and play it on any device that you choose to move to. I think this will make the whole gaming ecosystem more free and more friendly for users. And over time, as we see these platforms opened up, we're going to see really strong competition between stores and platforms and payment ecosystems and the dozens of different service providers who each provide supporting tools for game developers. You're talking about engine creators and online service operators, cloud services. Open and fair competition between everybody will lead to much more efficiency for the industry, meaning better revenue sharing terms for developers like us, and meaning better prices for consumers. And ultimately, this is about best serving consumers by creating a healthy playing field for everybody. I think we also have to take an honest look at publisher business models and the areas where some of our practices have become customer adversarial over time. And the really two particular areas that stand out are pay to win and loot boxes. And you know, Fortnite made a brief exploration of loot boxes when we launched the initial, before Fortnite Battle Royale, there's the Fortnite Save the World PvE campaign, in which we had a bunch of randomized loot box purchasing. But we had a lot of talks about that. You know, some people love that way of playing. A lot of people spend a lot of money, but some people get very disappointed. They want to buy a particular thing, and so they spend over and over to buy loot boxes, hoping to get that thing, and they don't get it, and they get increasingly frustrated and develop a really unhealthy relationship with the game, where they overspend and ultimately come away disappointed. I think we have to ask ourselves as an industry, what do we want to be when we grow up? Do we want to be like this, like Las Vegas, the city we're in right now, right? It's a city full of hotels, full of slot machines, and outside all the hotels there are these bikini babes trying to drag people in to get them to play the slot machines. Do we want to be this? Do we want to be Las Vegas, or do we want to be worldwide, highly respected, creators of entertainment products that customers can trust? I think we will see over time, out of necessity, more and more of the highly respectable publishers will move away from loot boxes. And I don't think this is going to be a dramatic sacrifice. The most recent experience Epic has had with this was with Rocket League. Psyonix, the developer of Rocket League, joined with Epic, and we had a big talk about all of the different ways that we plan to monetize games in the futures and the shared values we have. And ultimately, we decided together to eliminate loot boxes from Rocket League. And so the week that happened, there was this massive outcry on Reddit where the people who had been really engaged in the loot box economy and felt like they were kind of the Alan Greenspans of micromanaging loot box economics and trading economics. The communities behind these things are deep. They were outraged by it, and they hated us, and they said we were ruining the game. But over time, people became happier with the game, and over Christmas, despite the game being many years old, it's at all-time peaks in terms of both engagement and monetization on a model that had been stripped completely of loot boxes and randomized purchasing. I think generally as a principle, when you're selling something, the customer has the right to know what they're buying, and we should adjust our products to do that. And we should be very reticent about creating any sort of entertainment experience where two humans competing have an outcome that's influenced by spending. It creates an unfair game with an unlevel playing field, and some games do it very well, almost deviously well. They tend to be whale-oriented, and they tend to not be mainstream. And so I would hope for the industry that these games with all of these customer adversarial practices get kind of boxed into this well-defined genre that's more Vegas than gaming, and that becomes recognized as a separate thing from the game industry itself. We're already seeing it being regulated in a lot of areas as, loot boxes are not gambling. They play on all of the mechanics of gambling except the ability to actually get money out in the end. And I think that whole market should be separated from the mainstream game industry ultimately, and we should adopt practices that we can really, in front of the general public and in front of shareholders, say that we're doing our best as a business to support our customers. The other really exciting trend is the opening up of games as participatory economies. We've seen this pioneered by Roblox, but also there's some work along the lines of this with Minecraft and other things, where creators are able to build more and more elaborate types of content themselves in the game and actually build businesses around it themselves. Fortnite is in the very early stages of trying to open up more as a platform for creation. But I think we need to really start thinking about games as a great growth opportunity for not just building an entertainment experience and selling it, but for building an entire economy in which all creators can participate. We already have some degree of this with streamers participating, earning a living from streaming games and promoting games. But we can go a lot further with creation tools built into games. And I think that where this is ultimately heading is towards more and more games becoming open platforms for creators to build and release their own stuff independent of companies' efforts themselves. Like, the Fortnite Marshmallow concert was a huge event that was widely attended. But we would like, in the future, any musician to be able to hold their own concert of that sort without having to coordinate with us, without having to do a deal, but just be able to do that. And I think that this is the beginning of a world that moves beyond kind of traditional advertising as a way of reaching customers. The Star Wars crossover in Fortnite, the Marvel crossover in Fortnite, these are awesome ways in which the two brands came together, the Fortnite brand and these partner brands, and delivered an amazing new entertainment experience to customers for free, and raised awareness of everybody's products. And these were not advertisements, and they were far more engaging and exciting than ads. And I think the future of the game industry is going to see a lot more of that and a lot less of the traditional display advertising, where you're taking somebody's time away from the thing they're doing and annoying them by putting some unwanted piece of content in front of them in hopes that they'll take an action. That's obsolete. The future of this is you have an awesome new product you want consumers to know about, you start releasing free stuff in games that customers can experience and enjoy it. And this is happening on a larger and larger scale. 3 years ago, Epic worked closely with McLaren, the supercar company, to help visualize a car during its pre-production process before it was manufactured. So that resulted in the production of a successful McLaren supercar, but then that car just dropped into Rocket League. They took the billion polygon photorealistic model that had been built for this industrial visualization effort and put it in a game. I think more and more the convergence of real-time graphics is going to, in all of these industries is going to enable awesome crossover opportunities for all games. Now finally, I'd like to talk about gaming as a platform for discourse. Since the very beginning of all forms of media, these creative works have been a venue for the creators to share their views on politics through telling stories. If you think back to Kill a Mockingbird and the impact that had on people's views in the time, I think that's a genuine outlet for games that really make people think about things. I think this is an important aspect of the game industry. I think we need to separate the creatives' commentary from, and engagement with political themes from the marketing departments, and we should get the marketing departments out of politics. And the world is really screwed up right now. Right now, your political orientation determines which fast food chicken restaurant you go to, and that's really dumb. There's no reason to drag divisive topics like that into gaming at all. And it gets to the heart of what a company is, right? A company is a group of people who get together to accomplish a mission that is larger than what any one person can do. And a company's mission it's a holy thing to it, right? Epic's mission is to build great technology and great games. And we can count on every employee at Epic. We can even demand that every employee at Epic unite behind that mission. But in every other matter, we have to respect their personal opinions, and that they may differ from managements or each other's or whatever. And we need to create a very clear separation between church and state, where our businesses are operating as neutral venues for entertainment, and employees, customers, everybody else can hold their own views and not be judged by us for that. I think we're seeing a lot of controversy around political censorship of social media, pressure from foreign countries on domestic companies about discourse. I think to get through that, we as companies need to divorce ourselves from politics and say that that is for individuals to engage in, and that we as platforms should be neutral. And when we're making decisions about content moderation, what we should allow in our communities and what we should not allow, we should have very clearly established rules and treat the decision function on that almost as a judicial branch of the company, as opposed to making a lot of ad hoc decisions based on convenience. So to summarize the hopes for 2020, we want to see all platforms connected, not just technically as you see in Fortnite, but all of these social ecosystems around all of the different gaming platforms connected, so that an Xbox Live user can be playing any game and have friends on PlayStation Network and can play games across platforms, where each platform itself adopts some sort of open standards for this. We want open purchasing across platforms so that publishers can choose the most convenient and economical payment methods for everything. We want cross-platform payments, so if you buy one thing on one platform, the publisher can deem you own it on all platforms. We want to encourage customer-aligned business models in which we're all working together to sell great products to customers that they want, and in selling them those things, to have the only negotiation being about, the price and the goods, and not about all of the ancillary tack-on, drag-along things like data usage and surveillance in our businesses. We want to foster games with creator economies, so that games not only become an outlet for the publishers to express their ideas, but for all of the users. And we need to respect gamer rights and freedoms. And so I think this is all part of what's going to happen over the course of 2020, which is the move away from a whole bunch of walled gardens into something that's increasingly open and comes to resemble, by the end of this decade, an open metaverse in which players get together with their friends, and they go from game experience to game experience, staying together as a group, as friends, and going across all platforms, and not really having to worry about what company made the device they're on, or what company is operating the servers they're playing on as they go through these experiences. And I think the path to this could be really smooth if everybody works together. But I also fear that there's an opportunity for this decade to be another lost decade. Remember Microsoft's lost decade, where they spent an entire 10 years under leadership that was trying to close Windows down and create an iOS-style ecosystem around it. Fortunately, those efforts all failed, but there's a real risk that in all of the platforms exerting their power and having a very short-sighted view about their interests and the interests of the overall industry, about being locked into another decade of platform wars. And I'm really hopeful that we can get through it, but we're all going to have to be steadfast in fighting for these things. The opening up of games and cross-platform play involved a lot of tough and painful conversations between parties, which ultimately resulted in great things for all gamers. And we need to be all prepared to have those unpleasant conversations as much as we need in order to achieve a good future. So that's my opinion. That's what I really think. Thank you very much for your time.